is Ashley Hunt. I'm the Senior Project Management Instructor here at Stormwind Studios. So I teach all of the project management certifications like PMP. We're going to talk a little bit about Project Plus. I like it. We're going to talk a little bit about Project Plus just because a lot of these certifications, and it doesn't even have to be Project Plus, the PMP, the Certified Associate in Project Management, the Project Plus, Discipline Agile, all of these things have to do with adapting and adjusting and tailoring our ability to handle pretty much anything that comes at us any given day. So how many of you are practicing Agile just in general? Or you're like, you know what, I've heard of it. We're maybe going there, but I don't know a lot about it. Or yeah, raise his hand. Or we're already practicing some agility. And when we talk about Agile and risk and predictive project management or waterfall, you're hybrid? That was my next question, Glenn. Thank you. Hybrid. Because it depends on the project, it depends on the department, it depends on, what types of projects we're actually working on. Some projects benefit better from a full-blown plan-driven approach. Other projects benefit a little bit more from that flexibility and that adaptability. Learn Agile, but still trying to delegate more of my plate, more on your plate. Yeah, department is slowly making the switch. You know what? I hear that. We just wrapped up, PMP last week. Tons of people were like, we are fully predictive, or we're fully agile, or we're hybrid, or we're trying to get there. Currently, wild west, cats and dogs living together. And I hear that all the time. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today, just a little bit of, the framework of Agile. Certainly, we don't have a ton of time to get into everything. But just as an overview, it's mass hysteria. I hear that too. It's like the wild, wild west of project management going on. And sometimes, that whole Agile is sort of the flavor of the month, and senior management are like, yeah, we're going to do it. And then they get in there and they're like, yeah, we have no idea what we're doing. And that definitely does happen. What we're going to talk about today, we'll talk a little bit about data security and compliance. And I can tell by the job roles in here, some of you are going to be like, well, duh, for sure. But at the same time, how can we implement risk management approaches regardless of the types of projects we're working on? Surface level, we start the project sheets, but very little follow-up on the process. I hear that a lot too, as far as formalized risk management, formalized project management even. And it does depend. And sometimes we're just literally flying by the seat of our pants, trying to figure out how to deal with situations as they arise. We'll look at identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, just a high level of the framework. Much of what we're covering today does come from the CompTIA Project Plus, the newest version, 005. But all of these things we cover in other classes as well. So risk management, how mature would you say your risk management strategies are? Is it pretty well documented? Are you using, a risk register, an issue log, or anything like that? Regardless of the types of projects that you're working on, how well documented are things? Or are we still in the wild, wild west? We'll talk a little bit about, as far as the Agile framework is concerned, how sometimes it's easier to stay in front of risks because we're short-term planning and reacting in the moment. Whereas in a predictive environment, we're trying to almost look into the future a little bit and see, what could happen. You use S2Org? Nice. Okay, because, I get a lot of people in my project management classes that are like, does the fire hose approach count? If there's a fire, we put it out, and nothing is like super formal. Use a risk register? Nice one. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that today, prompt lists and so on as we go, but depending on the maturity level of the risk responses and how your organization deals with that. How many of you have a PMO? Do you have a project management office or oversight committee or community of practice or somebody, a group that says, hey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna use these templates. We're gonna do it this way. You do, Glenn? And that's good. I think more and more people these days are saying, yeah, you know what? We do have a PMO. And sometimes the PMO is in charge. You do too, Chris, of data security and, oversight committee I'm sure I can tell by a lot of the job roles that there's a lot of compliance, there's a lot of regulations probably involved in your day-to-day, some of which is going to handle the process of safeguarding digital information and protection from corruption, theft, and unauthorized access. Certainly you're here because cybersecurity is, at the maybe top of your risk register, at the top of your concerns. And so we're all worried about it. It's something that every business, every organization, and even just opening up my junk mail this morning, I was thinking about the webinar, and they're like, oh, this account has been closed or something. I'm like, delete. So when we look at the CIA triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, it's like, okay, what are the aspects? So you tell me, what is your biggest cybersecurity concern? Is it, hacking your customer database? Is it, email phishing? Is it, what's really your biggest concern? What's on the forefront of your mind? Because that's essentially end users. Yeah, that's something we're going to talk about as well. The end users, or the people in your organization. So I see a lot of phishing, end users, compliance, having someone in our network undetected. And all of those things, we look at users clicking on stupid things. It happens. Ransomware, email phishing, hacking, patient safety, balancing patient care with security. Yep, end users for sure. And so silly people tricks indeed, for sure. And it happens, and it doesn't matter, in a lot of ways how, in front of everything we are. There's always going to be silly people tricks, right? There's always going to be the bad people out there doing things. And, we have two-factor authentication. How many of you have three-factor? Two-factor versus three-factor authentication. And while it's a pain for those of us that are like, yeah, fine, text me, I'll enter the code and all of that. But it does definitely protect the organization from silly people tricks. Executives, managers deciding they need to run around the process because it's important in the moment. Oh, yes, the rules have to apply to everybody. The rules have to apply to everybody. And that, the struggle is real. I've heard that before. Lots of people are like, yeah, what he said. Yeah, totally. For sure. And so it's like, how do we top-down train when executives and managers are like, oh, well, I'm important and this is very important. And, I'm just going to work around that. And, that puts everybody. And then when something goes sideways, they're like, why did that happen? Yeah. Strong passwords are important. Configuration management, documentation updates. I'll never forget when we first started using SharePoint. Not here, but when SharePoint was first born, it was the wild, wild west of version control. And people would start labeling their documentation like in all caps, master, 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 not kidding. This is the one that you use, And so having updated documentation for rules, requirements, compliance, that kind of thing, talk about the wild, wild west. And so having configuration management systems in place for version control, the most updated information, not a lot of organizations really pay attention to that kind of version control. We're dealing with cloud-based information, Len's saying one could even have X factor, Mulder, but if the X is broken down, exceeded, then it's still game over and the user's account is compromised. Exactly. And it's just, no matter how many monitors and alerts we have and digital signatures and secure transactions, it's nerve-wracking to try and protect data from somebody getting in there and either erasing it, hacking it, or stealing it. And I get it. The conversation that we have today in this webinar isn't going to be something where you walk away and go, oh my gosh, she solved it all. Obviously, when we go through these types of things, it's fairly generic, but at the same time, having conversations with other people in a webinar, taking a class, having real world conversations, those are the types of things that we do in the classes because it's important. A lot of the content that, and I'm sure, for Cisco's and, CSM and PMPs, and we talk about, it's all perfect world. Well, we don't live in a perfect world. There's risk. And I am a described risk-averse catastrophic thinker, and there are things that I've missed on projects as well. So, we look at ensuring security controls, systems, software, all those kinds of things. All right, so let me ask you this. How many of you are virtual, hybrid, back in the office, or never left? I have found that SMS as a factor is even worse than not using that method. Yes, it is easy to spoof it. Absolutely. Okay, so yes, hybrid, never left. I'm sorry, back in the office, never left. Hybrid. Sounds like you like it. Hybrid back, mostly work from home. Yeah, hybrid, all of the above, never left, virtual office. Hybrid. Yeah, and if you never left, it's still important you never left. But those of you that did have to leave your hybrid, how did the transition from office to hybrid go? Remote before COVID. Yeah, that's what I was asking. Office now. Microsoft has nothing that actually works. Sorry, Microsoft. I said that out loud. Yeah, and hopefully now they're starting with all this AI that's out there. That's both terrifying and exciting. Maybe they'll come up with something, but easy transition. 90% of my job can be done remote. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I hear from a lot of people, especially in IT departments, trying to do the rollout when everybody went virtual. And they were like, wow, it was a nightmare. I lost my VPN password and I can't get into the system. Or, I just used my home laptop. And everybody's like, don't do that. Remote during COVID, office on perm for desktop support. Oh, nice. 100% of my job can be done remote, but forced back in for collaboration. You just waiting for your own personal Jarvis? Me too. Because the challenge is out there. And even, I've done a couple webinars on like ChatGPT and AI and concerns about using artificial intelligence, and those types of things. And I get it. The cyber attacks, those are bad. Theft or loss of devices, data theft, human error. I think we see a lot more of the human error side of things. But data breaches cost an average of over $4 million a year. And healthcare usually seems to get hit the most. And that's why I sort of brought up that, and I think it was Andrew, the patient care and how important it is. In the beginning, learning to work from home was a challenge. It was a challenge. We call it a challenge. After 3 years, we are all, oh, okay, that's good. Jeeves as your AI butler. Jeeves, Jarvis? I want one of them. Maybe they like cook too. That'd be awesome. But applying a baseline for compliance, we've got people, process, and technology, right? And I don't know about any of all three are ever going to be perfect. People, certainly not. But process, and part of this whole agility thing that we're going to be talking about is that idea of constant resetting. Like, did that work? No, it didn't. Let's try something different. Whereas the predictive environment, even on the hybrid predictive agile environment, that ability to pivot quickly, things are traveling so fast. Technology is moving at the speed of sound, at least. And we are trying to get in front of it and be able to utilize it for good and counteract the bad. Developed a good system. Now working in the office is the challenge. Yeah, exactly. It's a journey, not a switch. You're absolutely right. Trying to implement something new. And it can be very difficult. The struggle is real because I hear from people all the time that are IT project managers, that kind of thing. And they're trying to implement better best practices from the bottom up. And it's difficult because the stakeholders are like, no, we want this documentation, or no, we do things this way. And so trying to figure out, like, how do we get to that point where we know what data we have, what we need, what needs to be protected, what's the value of the data, and understanding, risk management from a perspective of it's every day. It's not just something where we're like, oh, well, a month from now, maybe that'll happen. It's every single day. And so utilizing agility to counteract risk is actually a really good way of getting in front of it. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple questions once we get into this. We'll go through this framework just a little bit. Definitely in a longer class, certification class, we go through it much more in depth. But identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Anybody familiar with this cycle? Is there something that you've learned before or been taught before? This is what CompTIA feels is the best framework to go through to protect, cybersecurity, detect, respond, recover after identification. But the key is to identify it in the first place, having full visibility into what our assets are and understanding current risks. Risk owners, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but how many of you have very specific peeps who are supposed to respond to very specific things? Do you have what you might consider risk owners? If this happens, it's your go time? Or is it more in the moment? I mean, we all have specialists. We all have people that we know are better at other things. But I think you do. Good, good, good. See, you're ahead. You're ahead of it, because a lot of times people are like scrambling. Who can deal with this? Who's the right person for this? Yeah, it's you. Awesome. There you go. And see, there's an LOL, I wish, really understanding who those best assets are, who those best resources are, and understanding levels of acceptance. 3 IT staff, everyone responds to everything. It's scrambled eggs. It's true. I know the struggle's real in the real world. I get it. And it's hard to know, like, what is a catastrophe? What is something that we have to deal with right away? Yeah, same. Yeah, same here. At 3IT, you do it all. You're the only IT staff? William, very busy. Very, very busy. So you're the only one that can jump in and deal with some of the things that come up on a regular basis. So yeah, I wish, for a lot of you that you did have that stuff. And it's tough to protect and control access to digital and physical assets. One of the hardest parts is the ability to educate and train people. Yeah, heavy Cisco, all the fun. Yeah, all the fun, education and training on process. And, I realize that a lot of times, as mentioned, a lot of training is perfect world. But one of the things that I like to do, and somewhat similar to what we're doing in this webinar, is have conversations about what you're going through and have other people and myself and other conversations about, well, what do you use? What works for you? You are me, myself, and I. You are a team of 3. I know it's tough to really look at. All right, we have a baseline. We have configuration systems, maybe change control, version control, and training on processes. It's tough to roll that training up to the other people in your organization. And I get it. I think when we're trying to detect and look at the better solutions and keep on top of things, it can be difficult. So trying to figure out what is the appropriate measure for our industry with our regulatory compliance, with me, myself, and I, with the scrambled eggs to try and identify cybersecurity events quickly. And that's one of the reasons why I think just agility. So Agile, I know I've got some Scrum Masters in here and so on. When we get to Agile just a little bit, we'll talk about an iteration and sort of what happens at high level in an iteration. But practicing agility, there's probably 50 plus different frameworks under the Agile umbrella. So when you say Agile, it's like saying waterfall. It doesn't denote an industry or certain best practices and so on. And so there's multiple frameworks like Scrum, like extreme programming and so on that can be utilized. But I see a ton of people using hybrids. Like, well, we have to be predictive. How many of you still use Gantt charts? How many of you are still doing a more predictive documentation type of thing? But at the same time, maybe you're doing daily stand-up meetings. Maybe you're doing retrospectives. I firmly believe that as you start to incorporate agility, you could still be a predictive or front-loaded planning type of person, project manager, and incorporate some of those agile best practices into your day-to-day, especially to stay in front of risk. If we can identify it maybe every day in a meeting, what are the impediments? What are some of the things that are happening that we can respond to? And yeah, having a response plan is great, but sometimes we do have to grab the fire hose and fix it. But I think communication, collecting and analyzing information, and implementing response plans to incorporate a lessons learned documentation situation. So from project to project, we have this trail of documentation, hopefully well organized and versioned in your cloud-based systems. When we look at recovery, and I think, hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but recovery, having that recovery plan in place, coordination with external parties, lessons learned, that kind of thing, and a prioritized checklist. Lindsay, I'm constantly working on knowledge acquisition through training seminars so as to be prepared for any potential events that may come up. And that's good. If we're not lifelong learners, and I applaud that and all of you for being here and for, taking certifications and that kind of thing, to maybe just pick up one thing. I'll never forget, I taught, 100 years ago, I was teaching an Excel class and somebody in the class said, oh, well, I use Excel, all the time. And I said, what if you learn one thing that saves you 15 minutes? Would it be worth it? And they're like, yep. And after the class, like, oh, I learned something that saved me 15 minutes. So no matter what little, nuggets of information come out of things like this, other classes and each other, it's really, it's a definitively good thing. For those of you that do have certifications, this also counts toward your continuing education units or your professional development units as well. So bonus. Risk. When we talk about risk management, I'm curious, physical, cyber, and human tend to be the big three. Tend to be, physical. How many of you have to worry about like locks, doors, surveillance, and alarms? How many of you are responsible for that side of security in your organization? Because a lot of times I get IT people in here and they're like, that's maintenance. You are? Okay, good. Yeah, lots of you. Surveillance, alarms, access control, IT is some. Yeah, maintenance, and for others, it's more on the maintenance side. But having that, surveillance, especially in highly regulated industries, maintenance there, yeah, those are going to be, physical risks, but keeping an eye, that big brother approach to surveillance, but keeping an eye on things, definitely important. I'm guessing more of you, though, are looking at policy, procedure compliance. Maybe people don't have the training. Let me ask you this. If your organization hires somebody, is part of their training program inclusive of IT? Is there training, if you know or don't know, it's fine, but do new hires go through training? Do people in your organization go through updates or seminars and that kind of thing? Stormwind, there you go. Yay. But no, and the no's, it's like, no, not here. And there's some yeses and no's. You do the IT orientation personally, awesome. Outdated, but yes, all. And there's some no's coming in. And it's like all that does is make your job more difficult, right? You do internal and external. So I see a lot of yeses, which is good for sure. A bit, but more's coming soon. No. Yeah, no before. Yes, you do external, internal. Yep, they just call they call help desk. Hi, I lost my VPN password again. Don't. Yeah, no, but that's good if you do have that training. And sometimes we have to take the onus on ourselves to incorporate some of those things. Use no before too. That's awesome. The other thing that we've seen is that virtual employees are using their own equipment. And you're like, oh, no, we need you to log in to the VPN. Use InfoSec IQ. Nice. Us as well. Cool. Yeah, so sometimes just that training. The one thing applicable through many disciplines is social interaction skills. Right, because one can always become trained on technical, but you really have to know how to convey what you discover, find out in terms that everyone can understand. Add to that patience and listening. It's true. One thing that I find fascinating too, and I'm glad that you brought that up, a lot of, just in general, project management has transitioned a bit from solely task-oriented focus and much more onto the people side and interacting with people and communication and team building and training and mentoring and that type of thing being super important, especially on the Agile side where we have this self-directed, self-managed team of people, but they also have a coach, a facilitator, a scrum master, if you will, who works within the constructs of transparent communication. And that's a very difficult thing to do for a lot of organizations, to be completely transparent and say, hey, we found something that's broken or something that doesn't work, or we know that our documentation is a bit flawed right now, but we're looking for ways to try and improve that. And so that human side is really important. You're absolutely correct. Cyber risk categories, IT governance, hardware, none of this is a surprise to any of you. Phishing, social media, and we could probably even throw on here like ChatGPT or AI. How many of you are using AI? Just out of curiosity. How many of you are using like a ChatGPT? We know Jeeves and Bard and all those good things. You play with Bard for fun? Yep, here. Yes, yeah. Yes, and that's a good thing, because there are so many people who are like, what is that? I wrapped up my P&P class and I was showing, we had a few minutes at the end and I was like, oh, check this out. They're, oh, whoa, never even heard of that before. Sentinel-1 here, it's play with chat and Bard for fun. Are developers used for coding help? That was another thing I was going to ask. Bard, Bing AI, GPT-4, exploring how to implement it in the organization. Yep, Proofpoint, Iron Skills as well. And what Joe was saying about our developers used for coding help, different types of things that, you can use. We've got a ton of webinars on ChatGPT. If that's something that you're interested in, they're all recorded. You can go check them out if you want to. But, ultimately, it's a good thing to look at and say, all right, well, how can we tailor this? Or what are some different ideas for training? Or could you put together, okay, Sentinel-1 and ThreatLocker, could you put together a training document for me that I can distribute out to, different departments that really outline the do's and don'ts? Yeah, I mean, oh no, I didn't catch your joke. Terminator and Stay Resistant program. There you go. No, I didn't even see it. I'm sorry, Lynn. I'm sorry, but LOL for sure. But tailoring considerations is, we've got to look at the individual aspects of what we're trying to accomplish. And tailoring is probably one of the most important skills that we can have. Whether you're a full-blown project manager or you're a head of IT or you are the help desk or you are the IT department, how many projects would you say you've got going on right now? How many projects are you currently working on right now? Some people say 20. Some people say one big one. Some people say 5, 8. Yeah, and so when we have all these different projects going on, 15, 10, I'm not surprised. It's usually my IT group that has, because we get a lot of IT people in the project management classes, and they're like, I'm working on 25 total projects. 2, it's slow time. That's good. That might be a good thing. A solid 3 with tons of little ones, too many at once. Yep, big time complaint, right? One big one for 24 to update all the networks at all locations. Wow, that's 50. That's a big project. And when we look at those projects that we're all working on and try and discern what's going to be the best way to deal with this, let's just define it as a handful. And I'm sure there's a lot. I mean, so when we look at how big are the projects, how complex are these projects, how important is it to the organization? Like, 15 locations, that's important, right? That's a biggie. So what is our development approach going to be? A lot of the projects that we work on can be front-loaded with a plan. Others, maybe we have to adapt and adjust and try some new things and see, does this work or not? And so the ability to look at unique and individual projects and say, okay, we've got this going on. We can adapt and adjust here. We can be more flexible here. We need documentation over here. And we absolutely need to have a strategy for risk. Maybe agility is a different way of looking at work. We hired a consultant for the project management of the network since my team is only 3 stars. Oh, yeah, that's good. I'm glad you have some help. Because that's a huge project. And, somebody's got to pay attention to tasks and details and what we execute and all of that. And it might be more realistic for that particular type of project to have a very stringent plan in place. Just remind me, how many of you are practicing some sort of Agile, Scrum? I know a lot of you said hybrid, but is it more hybrid predictive waterfall traditional, or is it more hybrid agile? Me, me, me. Me, me, me. Yeah. Agile actually was created in the 90s. 1990s, right? And I don't know what y'all were doing in 1995. I know what I was doing, trying to get dial-up to broadband, right? Yeah, dinosaur, right? But 1995 is when Agile was beginning to be created. You were in high school, you were 10, Mike. Oh, that's okay. We're working on the dinosaur of dial-up, and I can still hear that noise in my head. But 1995, there were a bunch of software developers who got together in Snowbird, Utah in 2001 and formed what we now know as what we now know as the Agile Alliance. And it was a group of software developers who were frustrated with, trying to have a front-loaded plan when they were developing software. It was very, very new. And think about it, we're still right at the end of the industrial age, right? Exactly, Jeff. That's what just went through my head, that noise of dial-up. And can you imagine being a brand new software developer in, let's say, a manufacturing plant? And somebody comes to you and says, we want you to automate our payroll. Everybody's punching clocks and other people are punching in for other people. And we want to automate our payroll systems. Figure it out. And they're like, okay, but we can't front load a plan because we keep learning things. And we need to adapt to what we're learning and adjust to what we're learning. So the creators of the Agile Alliance, the Agile Manifesto, also were the creators of some of the more popular Agile frameworks that you probably heard of, like Scrum and Extreme Programming, maybe feature-driven development, those types of things, because it was based on empirical process control. Just go with what we know today. And when we learn something new, we can implement it. And if it doesn't work, oh well, we unwind it and try something else. We use what we know today. And what this allows us to do is pivot and adapt and adjust to the changes in economy and technology and predictability, try and increase predictability a little bit more. If I'm looking 6 months out, I can't with really good, solid evidence say XYZ is going to happen. If I'm looking at tomorrow, it's a little bit easier to identify some of the things that might be necessary to adapt and adjust. So we talk about risk specifically in an Agile environment, having frequent conversations with our team of one, our team of three, with senior management, however that works out for you, to accelerate knowledge sharing is just a different way of working rather than emails and documents. And I know some of you are still at home or you're hybrid, so you are dealing with a lot of emails. How many of you spend too much time on Zoom calls? How many of you spend way too many meetings that could have been emails? Those types of things. But that communication is important, that knowledge sharing, that acceleration of knowledge sharing. Teams calls, yeah. And so having that communication and that, update on a regular basis helps us make the best decisions. But what we're really talking about here is risk identification. Yep. I'm a calendar monkey, back-to-back meetings that should have been emails. Oh, I'm sorry. Send Jarvis to meetings. Yes. Bebong. Yes, Lan. Oh, wow. Yeah, 1995, I just went way back. But, think about that, being a software developer and going, we have to do this differently. We need a different way of working. Those of you that do practice agility, how long are your iterations or sprints? How long would you say? Are they 2 weeks? Are they 3 weeks? Or you're like, well, we don't run things in iterations or sprints. If you're not familiar with Agile, let me give you a very, very simple example of the differences. 2 weeks, 1 or 2? The differences between a predictive environment and an Agile environment. An iteration or sprint is what they call it in Scrum, one of the frameworks, is typically 2 weeks. Sometimes they're 1. They might be 3 or 4, but essentially they're time boxed for 2 weeks. You just started your first sprint. That's awesome. Yeah, usually they're 2 weeks. That's pretty standard, but it's you do you, right? You do what you need to. But the way that, I look at agility and agile, how many of you have kids? How many of you have little kids or you raise kids, that kind of thing? If not, you'll still get this. But for sure, could you sit down and plan out all the kids? Could you plan out your kids' entire calendar for an entire year and be accurate? 2 here, 1 in college, 1 in high school. So could you plan it out? No way. No, because you're like, oh, okay, so a month from now, you've got a sleepover with Billy. Oh, wait, you're not friends with Billy anymore? We got to cancel that? No way. You can't. So sitting down and plotting out an entire calendar for your kids for an entire year is predictive. You're like, ah. Whereas with Agile, could you plan maybe a week? You're week to week, day to day. Exactly. Exactly. You could plan out a week and say, okay, if something gets a little sideways or somebody gets the chicken pox or you're not friends with Billy this week, we can adapt and we can adjust. But yeah, sickness, injury, sports changing. Right, so we have to practice agility. So a sprint or an iteration is like planning out 2 weeks of our lives and going, all right, this is what we think is going to happen, right? And plan it out, and then we do the work. And that gives you the ability to kind of pivot and short-term plan with an idea as to, well, yeah, we've got an entire year of sports and church and friends and all of that. But we got to roll with it, right? As things change or emerge. So an iteration in Agile is planning 2 weeks, essentially. And just keep it simple for today. Planning that 2 weeks and trying to execute it, right, with pop quizzes that come up for sure. And every single day, the development team, your team, is going to get together and answer 3 questions. What did I do yesterday to help the team, the project, the organization meet the goal? What am I going to work on today? And what impediments are in my way? Meaning, where are the speed bumps? Where are the stop signs? Where are the things that are keeping us from meeting our goal? You know what this does every single day? It identifies risk. What are some of the things that are keeping us from moving forward? Now, it's not a solution-oriented meeting. It's just informational only. And then the team goes back and ultimately, discusses the solutions. The daily stand-up is definitely, how many of you do stand-up meetings? Anybody do those? Or sit down Zoom meeting? You're allowed to sit. The whole thought process about standing is nobody gets too comfortable. Yes, you do. Wish I did. Some teams do it like twice a week and make it, because usually they're supposed to be about 15 minutes. But some teams will say, you know what? We do them twice a week. We do them for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or that. Your team doesn't get it. It takes a little while to get the team on board. I mean, it takes nobody likes change. Humans don't like change, right? And so it's one of those things where it's a practice, but the time boxing of it can be difficult. Sometimes we don't want to say, okay, I'm sorry, you're mid-sentence, but your 15 minutes is up. Or no, don't be solution-oriented, because we're so used to sitting in meetings and tossing around brainstormed ideas about solutions, right? So yeah, it definitely takes practice. It's definitely something, we go way more into in classes and so on, but I get it. I understand. Transitioning to Agile is difficult. That's why so many organizations are like, let's go Agile. And everybody's, what? They don't know how to do it or implement it or support it. The reviews are at the end of your 2 weeks. You look back on those 2 weeks and go, how do we do? What needed to change? What risks did we identify? How did we improve our processes? Or did we? If we didn't, what are we going to do differently going forward? Yeah, they're like, how do you spell Agile? Practice agility. Here's one of the biggest aspects of Agile that I find 100% super important, and that's the retrospective. The retrospective is like a lessons learned meeting every 2 weeks. How many of you do lessons learned? Most projects do. If it's more formalized. How many of you do lessons learned? What if we did it every 2 weeks? What if we looked back every 2 weeks and we said, what are we going to keep doing? What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to change. What are some of the things that we can see from the outside that are going to help us plan for the next iteration? Totally. Yeah, and we definitely go through how to do a retrospective, how to do stand-up meetings, all of those things in almost every class I teach except Six Sigma. One of the best practices that are recommended are things like prompt lists, brainstorming for risk. And because we're talking about cybersecurity, because we're talking about things that can come from the outside, a standard prompt list like Pestle, Teacup, or Spectrum allows us to focus our brainstorming on categories of external potential threats. Because, yeah, there are opportunities, but let's face it, we're worried about the bad stuff, right? What can come from the outside? Let's compartmentalize our brainstorming and just focus topic by topic. And then when we document the identified risk, it doesn't have to be external. You can make up your own. It can be internal as well. But a lot of times, cybersecurity attacks come from the outside, right? Maybe it's human error internally, but it comes from the outside. Anybody do prompt lists or strategic brainstorming with categories? And I get it. Risk can be analysis paralysis. It really can. You can just circle, 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 circle. But I find that having compartmentalized brainstorming, doing effective root cause analysis, maybe a SWOT, anybody use strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? A SWOT matrix, strengths, what's going really well for us right now. We've got a great team of people, we've got great templates, everybody seems to be following the rules. Yeah. What are the weaknesses? What are the challenges right now? What's not going so well in the present? Because opportunities can come from strengths and threats can come from weaknesses. If you do it, and let me know if you do it this way too. I have a really difficult time saying diagonally. I just want to say diagonally. I just do. But when I use a SWOT matrix, we go diagonally also, where we go, what strengths do we have right now that if we don't leverage could produce a threat in the future? And what weaknesses can we overcome that potentially could produce an opportunity in the future? Anybody brainstorm like that? It's a different way of looking at, the compartmentalized brainstorming. And it's a good conversation to have. What you're looking at behind me is just a basic risk register. And I give out a bunch of templates in my class and things like that. And one of probably the more requested templates is the risk register if there isn't anything formally documented. Mine is not purple, it's Excel. But at a very basic level, I document what is the category. So if you do compartmentalized brainstorming, or you're looking at scope categories, or stakeholder categories, wherever that risk is going to come from, I start with that. And I like using Excel because I can sort and filter, I can organize by category, and maybe potentially find common root causes that can hopefully eradicate a bunch of them. What is the description of the risk? Who's the risk owner? And I know for some of you, that's why I was asking, like, me, I'm the owner, I have to do everything. But, when we look at who's the best person to implement the response, that's an important conversation as well. What about probability and impact? Do you use a red, yellow, green, a high, medium, low, maybe a Likert scale of 1 through 5? Anybody documenting probability and impact? I use a 1 through 5 scale, and then it multiplies it to give it a score. And then it flips it. You use a 1 through 5 too? Yeah, it'll flip the traffic light, the red, yellow, green, as needed. Mine's definitively more for threats than for opportunities. And then a priority number, an indicator, which we'll talk about, which essentially is what's called a trigger. I feel triggered. We'll look at triggers. And then what is our strategy? What's our action plan? And another good column to add would be, and did it work? Did it actually work? For me, I often look at, triggers as the catalyst for the risk event. It's what lets us know the risk is on its way. The problem is that, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, you can yes or no me, but a lot of times it's after the fact, it's hindsight. Something happens and we look back and we say, oh, okay, that's why that happened. one of the best documentation for lessons learned is to go back and document those triggers. Like, here's the catalyst. Now we see it coming the next time. Maybe a little bit different, but at least we're like, oh, here it comes. Because risk is supposed to be identified, a known unknown. We know it could happen. We know there's a probability. We know what the potential impact could be. And that helps us craft our response. The surprises or the issues probably still have a trigger that we could go back and document. So it took me a while to make that a best practice. It's like, oh, I'll remember. And then I didn't, so triggers get documented in the risk register as well. And sometimes when we implement a response, we have to have a workaround. Have you ever had a risk event, something that happened? It doesn't even have to be catastrophic or major, where you think you've got the best way to handle it, and you implement that response and create a whole other problem. Like, the actual response created another problem. You go to put the fire out, whoop, pops up someplace else. That's what's called a secondary risk. And this is where we get into, okay, we put this patch in, or we changed everybody's passwords, and we did two-factor authentication, and then, all right, we think, yeah, that's the response. And that response now creates a problem somewhere else. Yes, you've experienced the aspect of being more retroactive, putting out fires, than proactive, preventing them. Yeah, and it's not hard to do. I mean, it's just we get caught up in our day-to-day. We get caught up in, the work. And that's why I like the stand-up meetings, what impediments, even if it's just what risks have we identified today? And then having the retrospective at the end. What did we learn? What are we going to keep doing? What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to change? How are we going to improve? You implemented Sentinel-1 and now people can't download zip files. There it is. Your secondary risk event. Oh, you're like, ah. And residual risk is somewhat similar. It's like maybe the Sentinel-1 works for other things. It's just affecting, the zip file download. And it's more like residual. It's leftover risk that you have to now go back and create a solution for. You're like, oh no. But risk is iterative. I mean, it's this constant, like, and would you say you're risk-taking, risk-averse, or risk-neutral? What about the zip domains? Right? And maybe residual risk as well. But in general, would you say you're more of a risk-taker? You're more risk-averse? It depends. Like, just out of curiosity for fun, would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? Would you go swimming with sharks? Would you go on a humongous roller coaster? You're living on the edge? You're a risk taker? Yeah? Anybody completely risk averse? Because here's the thing, risk takers, you jump out of an airplane. I've done that. Oh, sharks? No, I don't ever enter the food chain. Risk averse? That's a no. So let's say all of us are on a team together. Yeah, I travel a lot too. I love to travel, but you want it all. You want it all. Yeah, so let's say we're all on a team together. The way that we each assess risk based on our aversion to it or our taking, let's do it, take the risk, it's worth it, for sure. And then you get the moderate, right? Context, it depends on the context, like, roller coasters maybe, sharks, no. Depends. We all look at risk differently. And one of the things that, we talk about in classes and I've put into practice before is really outlining what's a high, medium, and a low. What's a red, yellow, green? What's a 5? Because if I'm risk averse, I might think it's a 5, like, and somebody who's a risk taker or maybe more moderate would say, that's a 3. What are you talking about? So I feel like especially with IT, cybersecurity, project management, really documenting, outlining, this is a high, medium, low. And here's the impact, high, medium, low. And putting it in paper, and sometimes with senior management, that's $1 million risk right there. If things go sideways, it's going to cost you $1 million. Because red doesn't seem to scare senior managers. They're like, red's not a scary color. I love red. And you're like, okay, how about losing $1 million? And they're like, so it's how we document based on risk-taking, risk aversion, that kind of thing. You jump out of a good airplane or a poor one, but I demand a working parachute. Yes. No. And that's why, the auditing And what was just, on the screen is kind of like checking ourselves before we wreck ourselves, going back and trying to determine, are we doing a good job with this? And so, with CompTIA, well, some of the things, how many of you have heard of Project Plus? Or it's something that you're interested in? You can tell me no. You're not going to hurt my feelings at all. But how about it's no longer we had a fire, but now it's a thermal event? Yes. Change the color scheme to be an ever larger stack pile of money. It's true. If you throw money if you document that and say it's a 50% probability that this is going to cost $1 million, they don't likey that. Yes. You're interested? All right, cool. So the Project Plus, CompTIA Project Plus, has really in the past been designed as almost an initial intro to project management. And it's really gotten a facelift over the past couple years, really very, very targeted to IT specifically, compliance, risk. Yes, it also is about agility in some cases, but did a study that, 25% of hiring managers request project management skills on their IT job openings. And that's changed, over time. So that means what? 100,000 of the 400,000 IT jobs out there in the US right now are looking for project management skills. So the CompTIA Project Plus really married project management, IT, compliance, and Agile, which falls under the project management umbrella, but there's still that predictive, documented aspect of, project management and the tailoring ability of looking at a project and saying, okay, well, how do we run this? How do we pivot? How do we adjust? How do we change things? And previously, Agile, everybody thinks of Agile as like, oh, that's just for software development. It's not just for software development anymore. It is all over the project management professional, the certified associate in project management, CompTIA Project Plus, and as becoming a need to be able to move faster to practice that agility in a way that is effective. So it wouldn't matter if you were interested in the CompTIA Project Plus. You don't need any experience at all. A lot of you, how many years experience do you all have? Some people are new. They just got out of college or graduated from university, or they're working at a help desk and they're like, hey, you know what? I want to move up in my career. This is something that I'm interested in. I need more best practices and cert behind my, my letters after my name, essentially. And so if that's something that you are interested in, and of course you can ask me about CAPM or PMP or whatever you want as we wrap up here, but the Project Plus really was updated last year. So it's the most up-to-date information. It's the most risk management focused as far as compliance is concerned. So we have risk, compliance, predictive, agile, project management, best practices, all in one certification. And I was really impressed when it first came out. I've got it on demand, and we also teach it live. And I was really impressed because up until that point, CompTIA was really sort of like a mini PMP, a very high level project management professional, which is the Project Management Institute. And man, they just were like, okay, let's look at the industry. Let's do a bunch of surveys. Let's figure out what's going on out there in the world, and really changed it exponentially. So with that being said, the second most required skill for, risk management is, that in the IT industry. So this cert was absolutely designed for that. They only updated it. It's like a year ago, almost to the day, a little bit, 10 days past, almost to the day. So it's a brand new exam, brand new certification, brand new content, and really accommodating Agile practices. You all probably won't easily believe me, but I have over 50 years of experience and I'm only 62. You started as a child for fun, then just saw what computer could do for all of us. That is awesome. Congratulations. I was a prodigy too. I was at AOL, I was 5. Started very young. But no, good for you. Congratulations. And the cool thing about that is you've seen how much things have changed, right, over the years. And certifications like this too, it's important for them to stay in front of what's going on in the market. Absolutely. But I teach all the Agile classes, all the predictive classes. I teach the Six Sigma classes, Lean Six Sigma, and so on in Stormwind. Some are on demand. like working with Kanban boards. I teach a class on Microsoft Planner. I don't know how many of you are using Planner, but it is cool. And I actually, oh, you're welcome. No problem. I actually just read an article this morning that Microsoft 365 is implementing Planner in Microsoft Teams. So now Planner is coming to Teams as an app with Microsoft Project and all sorts of things they're integrating. It used to just be, oh, we work with OneNote. No, now they work with everything, right? So that's coming in 2024. If you're interested in task boards or Planner, that kind of thing, check it out. Definitely, for sure. I loved Pong. I actually just talked about Pong in my class yesterday. It's awesome. And there's new Atari coming back, like Atari's making a comeback too. All sorts of fun things, but that's the webinar. I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what we do. We've got a ton of classes. We've got some amazing instructors in the IT, cybersecurity, AI, project management, classes. Everything's up to date. And it rolls just like this. I like to have conversations. I like for it to be a dialogue, not a monologue. I want to know what y'all are doing out there and how I can help you be more successful. The other thing that's a little bit different is after the classes are over, I don't go away. You have access to me whenever. I still get emails from students from 5 years ago. They're like, hey, I think I want to take my ACP now. Can you? And application reviews and so on, practice exams. Got it all, because my job is to make sure that you get the information that you need and get the support that you need to meet your professional goals. I'm so glad you came to this. If you are interested in anything, reach out to Mike. Let me get out of the way for just a second so that you can jot that down. Mike will hook you up. Mike will help you out. For sure that I look forward to seeing you in my classes. But if you're interested in Cisco or, anything that we got, Microsoft, her instructor has written, I don't even know, like 50 books for Microsoft. So we definitely, we got the goods. So I appreciate you spending an hour with me on a Friday. I am super happy that you all came. Hopefully I answered some questions. I'm glad you're a Stormwind junkie. Welcome back if you already are. It was great to meet everybody. Hopefully this was informative. I realize we only have an hour, so we can't go through everything. But thank you so much for everybody here at Stormwind Studios. We appreciate your time. This is also being recorded. Thank you, Russ. If you wanted to go back and watch it or pass it on, make sure you reach out to Mike. He can help you out. But other than that, if you are in the United States, have a wonderful holiday week next week. Happy Thanksgiving. And I look forward to seeing you in one of our classes sometime very soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.